They wheeled me into the pre-op bay at 6:12 a.m. on a Thursday. The nurse had the softest voice, like someone talking to a child or a skittish dog. She asked if my family was waiting in the lounge. I said yes, because that's what I'd been told my son had promised. "We'll be there, Mom. Of course, we'll wait." I wasn't anxious about the surgery. I was anxious about waking up. The overhead lights were cold, flat. Someone wrapped a warm blanket around my feet, and I wanted to cry from that small kindness. Isn't that strange? The things that crack you open aren't the big cinematic moments. They're things like a warm blanket on feet that haven't been touched in a long time. The anesthesiologist came in, brisk and pleasant. He said a few words I didn't hear, something about sleep. Then he asked who to call when I woke up. I gave my son's number, like I always did. I gave it out like it meant something, like it had ever meant something. He smiled and patted my arm. "We'll take good care of you." I woke up 7 hours later. My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking. I was alone. A different nurse was there, tapping something on a tablet. I asked if my family had been by. She looked confused. Nobody signed in. "I'm sorry," she said. "Maybe they stepped out?" I nodded, like that made sense. Maybe they stepped out for 7 hours. Maybe they were parking the car. Maybe they got caught in traffic. There are lies you tell yourself just to get through the first 30 seconds. They had told me they'd wait. I kept checking the door like an idiot. Every time it swung open, my heart moved. And every time it wasn't them, it dropped a little. Lower dot, by the time they finally showed up, the sky outside had gone from blue to bruised gray. I was sitting upright with a paper cup of ginger ale, my chart on my lap. My son walked in first, his wife behind him. She looked annoyed. He looked apologetic, but only just enough. "Sorry, traffic was crazy." And then the kids wanted lunch. We thought it would take less time. I said nothing. I nodded again. My nods are like small funerals. Later, when they thought I was asleep, I heard her whisper it. "She'll be fine. It wasn't even a big surgery. We only went to a movie." It's not like she knows. She said it like that. A movie. Like I'd misplaced a sock or missed a phone call. Like I wasn't the woman who once slept in a plastic chair all night when my son had a fever of 104. The woman who drove a coughing child to the ER at 3 a.m. in slippers. The woman who never bought a single new coat for herself because he kept growing out of his dot. It wasn't even a big surgery. Just a spinal fusion. Just a metal rod inside my back. It's just a few hours under general anesthesia while strangers sliced me open. But sure, go see a movie. That night, I pretended to sleep with the beeping of the monitor beside me. I stared at the ceiling and saw the truth line up in little pieces. No one forgets someone they truly love in an operating room. They don't. In the morning, the social worker came by with a clipboard. She asked if I needed help arranging my discharge. I asked her for a phone number instead. A lawyer. She blinked. I told her it wasn't urgent, just when she had a minute. It was the first move I made. A small one. It's just the sound of a chess piece lifting. But I felt it in my bones. I had been alone in that room while they bought popcorn and watched a comedy. I had been alone in the hours I needed someone most. And that kind of aloneness is different. It echoes. It brands you. They picked me up that afternoon, all smiles and plans. "We'll stop at the pharmacy. We'll make soup. The kids can stay with you if you need help." I stared out the window the whole ride home. I didn't speak. I let them build their fiction dot inside. They handed me a paper bag with my prescriptions and left within minutes. He had work in the morning. She had a Zoom call. The children had a birthday party, and I, apparently, had nothing at all. I waited until the door shut. I waited until I heard the car reverse out of the driveway. Then I reached for my notebook. I didn't write anything down. I just held the pen. Sometimes power begins in the hand before the mind even catches up. That was the day I stopped believing in blood ties. That was the day I stopped assuming love meant anything without action. That was the day I started calling things by their true names. And the true name for what happened was abandonment. The house I paid off with careful years was no longer mine in the way that mattered. The walls knew me, yes. The stove knew my rhythms. The windows carried the shape of my shoulders in their smudged panes. But the people inside had stopped seeing me long before the surgery. There was a time I would have called it love. What I gave them? Now I would call it inventory. I used to make lists in my mind when I couldn't sleep. His favorite bedtime snack. The exact way he liked his school shirt folded. It's the sound he made when he was pretending not to cry. That was the real work of mothering. It's not just cooking or cleaning, but memorizing someone else's existence so completely you could vanish inside it. I was 32 when his father left. My son was 8. I remember because that's the year I stopped laughing easily. I learned to do the heavy lifting without making noise about it. The mortgage, the fevers, the recitals, the math homework. I was tired all the time, but I called it strength. It took me too long to realize that strength doesn't mean silence. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's naming the things no one else wants to see. He used to draw me pictures, stick figures with triangle dresses, red hearts, and the word mama written backward. I kept a few of them in a box. That box stayed in my closet just above the sweaters I no longer wore. He drew those pictures with crayons. It's the same hands that once wrote, "I love you now," signed documents behind my back. It started 2 years ago. I didn't know it then, but the distance had begun to harden. He had that voice, the one that smiled without smiling. "You're not alone, Mom," he said, even as I stood in rooms by myself. I remember the first time I felt afraid in my own home. It wasn't a noise or a shadow. It was his tone. When I asked why the insurance papers looked different, when I noticed my name had shifted to the second line, he said I was imagining things. Said it like a joke. Said it like I was too fragile to know the truth. That's the thing about aging. They think they can speak over you, softly at first, then firmly, till you stop asking altogether. His wife started calling me forgetful, not in front of me. I only heard it once by accident. A voicemail left on the line when she thought she'd hung up. You know how she gets? She forgets. She spins things. You have to take care of it for her own good. For her own good. That phrase has teeth. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my place in their world. I started noticing patterns. Bills I never saw, appointments I wasn't told about. And then, one day, a letter arrived, addressed to me, but with his name underneath mine, listed as primary contact. He hadn't asked Dot. I asked him about it that weekend. We were sitting on the back porch. The air was sticky, and the light was soft in that way that makes things seem more gentle than they are. I saw that you changed the billing contacts. He didn't deny it. Just sipped his soda and looked at the grass. Said it was easier that way. Said he was helping. I nodded. I always nod. And when I looked up the deed to the house, the one I had paid off penny by penny, I found that it had been quietly restructured into something called a family trust. His name listed beside mine, equal owner. Just in case, he said. Just in case I became inconvenient. I didn't argue. I let it sit inside me like a stone. There was always a reason, a justification wrapped in care. I took care of everything for you, Mom. You're not getting any younger. I just want to help. But help doesn't look like silence. It doesn't look like removing someone's name from their own accounts. Doesn't look like controlling passwords or monitoring mail help is asked for. This was something else. This was a quiet erasure, and I had let it happen. That was the hardest part, not the betrayal, but the long, slow way I handed over my own life thinking it was love. Even the doctor visits had changed. His wife filled out my intake forms. She handed over my ID like it belonged to her. I became a task, a checkbox on their calendar. The person they called about prescriptions, but never for lunch. I stopped correcting them. I watched it all with the numbness of someone trying not to drown. I watched as they took over my appointments, then my groceries, then my bank access. Always. with that same smile. "It's just easier, Mom. Don't worry." But the truth was, I had become invisible. The woman who once held his hand through nightmares now needed permission to write a check. So I stopped asking, started listening. And I kept the small things. My safe deposit box key, the original deed. The first set of passwords I had never updated, the ones even they didn't know. I wasn't forgetful. I was watching, and when I was wheeled into that operating room alone, I already knew. I already understood what they had made me into. A liability, a chore, a narrative of concern they could control. That surgery was my proof. Not because they weren't there, but because they chose something else. They chose to forget that I mattered. Chose popcorn over presents. Screened over my scar, so when I asked the social worker for the number, it wasn't anger. It wasn't. Revenge.it was recognition. They had erased me on paper. It was time I wrote something new. The folder was thick, though I hadn't looked through it in months. It sat beneath the loose board in my bedroom closet, where I used to keep Christmas gifts when my son was little. Now it held something else, evidence, I suppose. Not for a courtroom, not for a fight. Just for truth. There were bank statements with missing pages. An updated will I didn't remember signing. Letters from the insurance company addressed to me but rerouted to their address, marked as received by household member. And a printout of the trust deed change that had quietly placed my name beside his, not above. Not solely, but beside. I don't even remember when I signed it, probably. One of those afternoons when they came over with soup and paperwork, fussing about appointments and dental cleanings. "It's just your renewal, Mom. Just sign here. You don't have to read all that." I wanted to believe them. You have to understand that. I wanted to believe I was still loved, still seen, still trusted to own my own life. It's strange how betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up in manila envelopes and signature lines. Sometimes it walks into your house carrying groceries and leaves carrying your future. I sat on the floor with that folder for over an hour. My back ached, the stitches from surgery still pulling when I bent too far. I didn't cry. That's not the kind of story this is. What I felt was something quieter. The click of final understanding, a settling. They hadn't just left me in that hospital. They had been leaving me piece by piece for years. I think the betrayal becomes real the moment you stop explaining it away. When you stop using phrases like they meant well or they were just trying to help. That's the moment you come back to yourself. That night, I didn't sleep. I made tea and sat by the kitchen window. The house was so quiet it felt like it had already forgotten I was there. At some point, I opened my laptop. I typed in the name the social worker had given me. A woman estate and elder law. Her photo made me feel something I hadn't expected. Not hope. Not fear. Permission, I sent an email before I could talk myself out of it. Just a few sentences. "My name is Margaret. I'm reaching out about my legal and financial situation. I believe my adult children have made decisions on my behalf without my informed consent. I would like to meet." I didn't sign it with love. I didn't explain myself. I just told the truth. By morning, she had written back. Simple, professional, a soft tone in her words that didn't patronize me. "We can meet next week. Would you prefer my office or somewhere else?" I chose somewhere else. A library near the park. I didn't want to bring the truth into the house just yet. It still wore their shape. In the days before the meeting, I moved. Slowly, recovery, yes, but also something deeper. A kind of shedding. I made quiet calls to update mailing addresses. I removed my name from joint utilities. I reviewed every paper I could find, and I stopped picking up their calls. He left 3 voicemails that week. Each one shorter than the last. Just checking. "In, Mom? You haven't answered. Is everything okay? Then we're worried. Please call back." Then nothing. I didn't block them. Wasn't hiding. I was preparing. There's a difference at the library. I wore a scarf I hadn't worn in years. It was a deep plum color, soft and warm, but I had bought it for myself the winter after I paid off the house. I remember thinking I deserved something soft that year. The lawyer met me at a small table by the window. She had kind eyes and a silver ring shaped like a bird. I liked her immediately because she didn't speak to me like I was broken. She spoke like I was capable. I showed her the folder. I told her about the surgery, the movie, the documents I hadn't understood. She didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She just listened. And when I finished, she said the words I hadn't allowed myself to say aloud. This is not okay. Not just morally, not just emotionally. Legally, she explained my options with a clarity that made my chest ache. There were reversals that could be filed. There were protections I could put in place. There were steps I could take that didn't require confrontation, just documentation. It was all there, all possible, all mine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the shift. Not toward revenge, not toward punishment, but toward reclamation. They had slowly taken the wheel of my life under the guise of concern. Now I was reaching for it again. My hands were unsteady. But they were mine. The lawyer gave me a list of actions. Some I could do alone, some she would file. We made a plan. On the way home, I stopped by a small shop I used to visit years ago. The kind with tiny glass bottles and old postcards and wire racks. I bought a notebook. It's plain, thick paper. No lines. I wanted something that didn't tell me. Where to, right? When I got home, I opened to the first page. Today, I took back my name. That was all I wrote. But it was enough. In the following days, I kept moving quietly. I filed forms. I requested original copies. I changed passwords. I separated my finances. I created a new will. One that did not list him. One that gave nothing to those who had. Erased me. And I did it without slamming doors. I didn't confront them. I didn't explain myself. I just moved forward, step by step, like someone waking up after a long sleep. And when I finally opened that envelope with the old school drawing inside his little handwriting, misspelling the word heart, I didn't cry. I just folded it again, gently, and placed it in the notebook beside my new will. 2 pages from a lifetime. One from a boy who loved me. One from a woman who remembered who she was. Approximately 1,000 words. I started saying no in small ways first. No to a visit, no to a call. No to a dinner that would leave me feeling like an empty chair in my own life. It felt strange at first, like wearing someone else's shoes. But I walked anyway. I had always been agreeable. It's what people said. She's so easygoing, so polite, so understanding. What they really meant was that I didn't resist, that I folded instead of pressing back. But something had shifted in me after the surgery, after the ginger ale in a paper cup, after the empty waiting room. There's a kind of dignity in absence. Once you've sat in a hospital bed and realized no one is coming, you stop waiting for anyone to save you. I didn't have a grand plan. It's just small actions. I closed the joint account. I moved my savings. I updated my medical directive to exclude them. No emergency access. No assumed rights. I chose someone else, a retired nurse I knew from church. Someone with a good head and no bloodline ties. Someone who saw me, not just my last name. I made a list of passwords and stored them in a sealed envelope with the lawyer. My lawyer. That word felt good in my mouth. Solid, protective, chosen. The woman at the bank had raised her eyebrows when I removed my son's name from everything. "Is this temporary?" she asked. I told her no. She didn't ask again, and I didn't explain. The old me would have filled the silence. "He's busy," I would have said. "It's nothing serious, just updating things." But there's power in withholding what they expect you to give. I began keeping different kinds of notes. Not on lined paper, but in my notebook. The one with the soft cover and unlined pages? Every night. I wrote something I had noticed. February 12th. I didn't feel nervous canceling the landline. February 13th, I said no to their Sunday lunch. They didn't ask why. February 15th, I smiled at the cashier who remembered my name. It wasn't a diary. It was proof that I existed. That I was coming back to myself, slowly, word by word. They noticed, of course, not right away. But eventually, my daughter-in-law texted first, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a bit. Then again, a few days later, we're worried. Are you okay? Ah, I didn't respond. That felt unnatural at first. I had always been the one to reassure, to soften. But I reminded myself when I was in the hospital, no one checked. No one stayed. No one chose me over their popcorn. A text is not a relationship. A check-in is not cared. My son called a week after that. He left a voicemail, his voice low. Mom, I don't know what's going on, but if you're mad, I'm sorry. Can we talk? He sounded like a boy again. For a moment, I closed my eyes and tried to remember his face at 8 years old. The way he used to hold my hand even when no one was looking. The way he used to curl into my lap without needing to be invited. That boy is gone. And the man who replaced him had made choices that cannot be undone with a phone call. I didn't return it. Instead, I started packing. Not everything. Not yet. But drawers, closets, the backs of cabinets where I had stored the parts of me no one else had touched. I found my mother's scarf, the one she wore the day she left her own marriage. I never asked why she left, only that she did it, without raising her voice. She took her name back quietly and never gave it up again. I tried the scarf on. It smelled faintly of cedar and something else sage, maybe. Memory. I folded it and placed it beside my passport. I wasn't sure yet where I'd go, just knew it wouldn't be here. They had taken over my house without ever moving in, rearranged it with their smiles and signatures, made it something I no longer recognized. But I had the original title now in a folder with my lawyer. I had copies, notarized, filed. They didn't know that yet. It gave me strength. I started noticing things I had ignored before, how they only visited after reminders, how they never listened when I mentioned things I loved, how every conversation turned toward convenience, their schedules, their priorities. I once told her, my daughter-in-law, that I had always wanted to see the Northern Lights. She blinked and changed the subject. Later, she gifted me a scented candle called Arctic Glow. It wasn't cruel, it was worse. It was indifferent. That's what people forget. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's not seeing someone at all. I saw myself now. Every wrinkle, every tremor in my hand, every stubborn thread of resolve that had outlasted the pain. I had survived childbirth, divorce, grief. I could survive being unwanted. The lawyer asked if I was ready to file the formal transfer. The one. That would make everything mine again, legally, cleanly, without their fingerprints. I said yes. She sent the papers. I signed them alone, at the same table where I used to help with science projects and spelling tests. The pen didn't shake. Afterward, I made tea. I sat in the kitchen, listening to the sound of water boiling. Felt like an ending and a beginning at once. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. Okay. No one would be making decisions for me again, without my voice. And my voice was back. I didn't leave in the middle of the night. I left in the middle of the morning with the sun steady on my back and the birds doing what birds always do, singing. Regardless of who's listening, there wasn't much I needed. I took 3 bags, one for clothes, one for documents, and one for the soft things: my notebook, my mother's scarf, and a small framed photograph of me as a child before anyone expected me to become useful. I locked the house behind me. I didn't look back. People say that all the time, like it's poetic. But truly, I didn't. I had already grieved that place. The walls had heard too many conversations that made me smaller. The kitchen had held too many silences after family. Dinners where I was thanked with a glance, never with warmth. They still had keys, of course. But what they didn't know was that the deed no longer bore their names. that I had severed the financial arteries they quietly fed from. They didn't know that the utilities had been rerouted, or that the new accounts were in my name only. They didn't know that I had taken the house and emptied it of their hold. It was mine again. But I didn't want it anymore. Sometimes reclaiming something is only the first step. Sometimes the real power is choosing to let go. I left the key in a small padded envelope with a letter to my lawyer authorizing her to oversee the sale. The house would be listed under her care. I asked for a delayed posting. A few weeks. Enough? Time to slip away before the calls started. I drove for 3 hours, not to any place specific. Just out. Past where the street signs carried memories. Past the grocery store where I once saw him in a Halloween costume, a plastic pumpkin in his hand. Past the clinic where I waited for biopsy results alone. Case. Past everything that tried to shrink me into a version they could manage. The motel was modest, clean enough, a courtyard lined with hibiscus. I asked for a ground floor room and paid in cash. The clerk didn't ask questions. He handed me a key with a sticky tag attached. Room 6. I unpacked slowly, hung 2 shirts, laid out the notebook, plugged in my phone and turned off notifications. Silence greeted me like an old friend. I made tea in a foam cup and sat on the edge of the bed. There was a stain on the carpet, shaped like a crescent. Someone else's story. Not mine to carry. The first night I slept with the light on. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't ready for full darkness just yet. It had taken years. To step out of their shadow, I needed to take my time learning how to live in my own light. The morning came without urgency. I walked to a small diner nearby, ordered eggs, toast, and jam. The waitress called me sweetheart. Her hair was gray at the temples, and she poured coffee like it mattered. When she asked where I was from, I said nowhere in particular. She nodded like she understood. I left her a generous tip and sat for another hour reading a paperback someone had left on the shelf by the door. It wasn't very good, but I finished it. It felt like a declaration to give something my full attention again. The days began to stack. I walked. I wrote. I listened to the radio when I felt lonely, though even loneliness had softened into something manageable. I kept a list in my notebook of things I could do without asking anyone. Buy flowers. Walk to the post office. Change my mind. I didn't check my voicemail. I didn't look at my son's social media. I didn't reread the texts that had once made me question my memory. You never said that, Mom. That's not what happened. You're imagining things? No, I wasn't. I just finally stopped letting them rewrite me. On the 6th day, I mailed a letter. Not to him, not to her, to the accountant I used to see once a year when filing taxes. I asked him to confirm the change in ownership and reroute all future inquiries to my lawyer. Then I made another call, the one that felt the most final. I called the community center where I used to volunteer, asked if they needed help again. The voice on the other end lit up. We've missed you, she said. Can you come next week? Yes, I said. Can. Not because someone approved it. Not because someone else cleared the calendar. But because I wanted to. That night, I sat outside the motel room and watched the stars appear one by one. There weren't many, but they were enough. A child ran past holding a popsicle, sticky and grinning. His mother called him gently from across the parking lot. For a moment, it stung. I had loved my son like that once, softly, without condition, without needing to be needed. But love given without return is not a virtue. It's a slow erasure. I'm not erased anymore. I brought out my notebook, wrote just one sentence. Today I lived a day that belonged to me. And I meant it. The first sign of panic was a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, nervous. Too polite. Hi, Margaret. This is Angela from Dr. Lehman's office. We've had some trouble confirming your medical proxy for the upcoming follow-up. We reached out to your son, but he said he's no longer listed. Just wanted to check in and make sure everything's okay. I deleted it. Then came the texts. First from him, then her. Mom, call me. We need to talk. Did something happen? Are you okay? The irony made me smile. When something had happened when I was lying in a hospital bed with a line in my arm and a nurse asking who. To call they were watching a movie with their phones on silent. But now, with their access cut off and their control interrupted, suddenly it was urgent. I didn't reply. The silence was not a punishment. It was a declaration. I am no longer available for explanations. I am no longer participating in the illusion that you did nothing wrong. He emailed next. That was new. Hi, Mom. I'm a little confused and really worried. I tried to pick up your prescription, but the pharmacy said I'm no longer authorized. I also tried to schedule your eye appointment, and they wouldn't let me. Are you okay, Kin? We talk. Love you. I read it twice. Then once more, just to be sure I wasn't making something out of nothing. But the pattern was clear. Not one mention of what he had done. Not one acknowledgement of the months of decisions made behind my back, of the hospital, of the movie, of this silence when I needed them most. Just confusion, just concern. Just then. Soft panic of someone who thought I'd always be there. Holding the same spot in the story, I didn't respond. Instead, I made tea. The motel's microwave made a low hum, and I stood watching the cup spin in circles. There was something soothing about the plainness of it all. The quiet rituals I now did only for myself. Later that day, I went for a walk. Passed by a bulletin. Board outside the community center. There was a flyer for a free painting class Thursday mornings. No experience needed. I took a tab. My phone buzzed again. This time a voicemail. Mom, I don't know what's going on. You've changed all your accounts. Your lawyer's saying everything has to go through her now. I don't understand. We're just trying to help. You never used to be like this. You never used to be like this. I listened to it 3 times. Not because I doubted what I heard, but because I wanted to remember what manipulation sounds like when it's wrapped in disappointment. He hadn't said he was sorry. He hadn't asked what I needed. He hadn't mentioned the hospital, the waiting room, or the blank space where a mother should have felt love. Just confusion. As if my independence were an injury. As if my decision to remove him from my accounts was an act of cruelty. It was not cruelty. It was clarity. That night I wrote again. February 22nd. They are unraveling. Not because I hurt them, but because I stopped letting them hold the knife. I didn't feel angry. I felt clean. The calls kept coming. Her voice now too. First urgent, then sharp. We just want to understand what you're doing. Then defensive. You've always been dramatic, but this is too far. And then, finally, cold. If you don't call us back, we'll have to assume something's seriously wrong. I turned the phone off for 3 days in that time. I took the painting class. I met a woman named Joyce who used too much yellow and laughed at her own jokes. I painted a crooked tree. And it's still standing. At night. I watched old movies on the motel TV, ones where the endings didn't rush to fix everything. I liked those best. The ones that let sadness exist beside beauty. I got another call the following Monday. The lawyer had forwarded it to me, just in case it was from him. He sounded tired, scared maybe? There was a pause before he spoke. Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just wanted to say that I didn't realize. What I was doing, I thought I was helping. Thought that's what you wanted. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. Really am. I just want to talk. Silence. Then. Softer. Please. I sat with that voicemail a long time. I didn't feel what I thought I would. Not triumph, not rage, not even satisfaction. Just a quiet kind of knowing. He had finally felt what I'd lived with. For years, the unease of being shut out. The confusion of being unimportant. The cold realization that someone you love can walk away and not look back. I didn't delete it. Didn't respond. Instead, I wrote one last thing in my notebook before. Bed, February 26th. They're reaching out, but I'm not reaching back. This silence is not a wall. It's a doorway. And I walk through it alone without asking. I began to think of the motel not as a pause, but as a beginning. The woman at the front desk learned my name. She started, leaving a mint on my pillow when she cleaned the room. Her name was Rosa. She never asked questions, only smiled and made sure the towels were soft. One afternoon, I brought her a pastry from the bakery down the street. She thanked me like it meant something, not because of the sugar, but because someone had thought of her. That's all I had wanted, I realized. Not flowers, not praise, just someone to remember me without being reminded. The community center became my rhythm. I helped shelve books in their tiny library and folded pamphlets for weekend events. A boy with a stutter read out loud to me every Friday. He liked dinosaur books. He always brought the same one. I never corrected him when he said Triceratops with an extra syllable. He laughed when I drew one for him in the corner of his paper. This quiet usefulness felt more like belonging than anything I'd had in years. No one there knew my story, not the whole of it. Just that I was retired, that I liked strong tea, that I showed up on time and stayed until the chairs were stacked. There was a woman named Elsie who volunteered on Thursdays. She wore her hair in a bun and always had something to say about the weather. One morning, she asked if I wanted to join a group that met at the cafe across the street. They called themselves the Tuesday Women. No agenda, just coffee and quiet. Company. I went. I listened more than I spoke. No one interrupted. No one needed anything from me beyond presence. I found myself laughing softly at first, unsure of the sound. But it was mine. It came from a part of me I thought had withered. They didn't know the woman I had been before. It's the one who always offered rides, who said yes even when tired, who watered her son's houseplants when they went on vacation and never received a thank you. They only knew this version, calmer, quieter, protective of her time, and they liked her. Sometimes I wondered if my family would recognize me now. I doubted it. The woman they remembered had been pliable, available, always listening. This one carried boundaries in her bones. The calls came less often now. Maybe they'd grown tired. Maybe the silence had finally started to mean something. Or maybe they were just waiting for me to break it. But I didn't. Instead, I made new routines. I bought a used bike and rode it along the canal path every morning. I painted another trees, one with roots so deep they spread off the paper. I made soup for my neighbor in the room next door when I heard her coughing. She didn't ask for it. She just knocked gently and left it there. She left me a note in return. Thank you. No one's done that for me in years. I knew that feeling. I didn't tell her why I understood. We shared a smile in the hallway and let it be enough. On the 10th night in the motel, I watched the sunset from the back stairwell. The sky had that washed-out orange that only happens when the air is still. A young couple walked by, holding hands, their heads tilted toward each other like sunflowers. Felt no envy, only the soft ache of remembering what tenderness looked like before it calcified. I thought of my son, of the last time he hugged me without it feeling like obligation. I tried to remember if there had been a final moment when it shifted, or if it had been so gradual I'd mistaken it for maturity. Maybe he had loved me once. Maybe he still did, in a shape that resembled love, but did not hold it. That's the danger of blood. Convinces you that obligation and care are the same. They're not. I don't think I ever asked to be worshipped. I only ever wanted to be remembered the way I remembered him, fully. Without asking, without convenience. And when that stopped, when it became a task instead of a person, I should have left sooner. But leaving is hard when your worth is woven into being needed. Now, I didn't need to be needed. I only needed to be free. There was a woman in the Tuesday group, Marlene, who offered to show me the rental listings at the senior complex where she lived. She said they had small apartments with good light and no stairs. I didn't say yes right away, but I thought about it. It would mean another change of address, another goodbye to a place I'd barely begun calling home. But it would also mean permanence, a kitchen that belonged to me. A space where no one had ever spoken to me like I was furniture. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I opened my notebook, wrote 2 lines. March 3rd, I am not rebuilding. I am building new. March. 3, I don't owe them my peace. But I owe it to myself. I didn't know what they were saying about me now. Maybe I was the villain in their story, the ungrateful mother, the stubborn matriarch who pushed them away. Let them believe it. Let them spin their tales. I had my own. Now, and it didn't begin with their names. He found me. Or maybe he didn't find me. Maybe he guessed. Maybe he drove past motels until one felt like it might fit the kind of woman I'd become. The kind who left without slamming a door. The kind who no longer answered to guilt. I was coming back from the corner cafe with a loaf of bread tucked under my arm when I saw him standing by the office. He hadn't noticed me yet. His hands were shoved into his coat pockets, and his shoulders were hunched like a boy waiting for the principal. His car was parked badly, front wheels angled like he'd stopped too fast. I could have turned around. I almost did. My legs hesitated just a moment too long. And he looked up, his eyes widened. He said my name. It landed on the pavement like something fragile. Like maybe if he said it the right way, I'd pretend nothing had broken. I walked past him toward my room, calm. I didn't run. I didn't wave. Just turned the key in the lock and stepped inside. Left the door open behind me. He followed. He didn't sit. Just stood there, breathing too loud, Mom. I didn't speak. I sat down at the little table where I sometimes ate dinner. Sometimes painted, sometimes wrote one quiet sentence about who I was becoming. I waited. He stepped inside, shut the door. He looked older than I remembered. Tired around the mouth. Hair was thinner. Or maybe I had simply stopped seeing him, with the softness that blurs the truth. I didn't call to say I was coming. I didn't know if I'd be welcome. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. Tried again. I've been worried. We've all been worried. I didn't understand why you shut us out. Why you did all this. He paused like I might fill the silence. I didn't. He looked around the room, took in the plain walls, the bed neatly made, the notebook on the table beside me. He reached toward the chair across from me. May I? I nodded once. He sat carefully, like it might break beneath him. Then he rested his elbows on his knees and leaned forward like he used to do as a boy when he was sorry for something. I remembered that posture. After breaking a window, after lying about grades, after saying something unkind to me in a tone that startled even him, he was still that boy somewhere, but buried beneath years of entitlement and a wife who told him what love looked like in spreadsheets and scheduled visits. Beneath the belief that I would always be there no matter how small he made me. I never meant to hurt you, he said. The sentence was soft. But it was not an apology. He swallowed, looked down at his hands. You know how things got. Fate. We thought we were helping. You started forgetting things. You looked tired all the time. And when the doctor said you needed surgery, we stepped in. I waited. He met my eyes. We stayed for you afterward. We brought food, picked up your medication. We tried. You went to a movie while I was in surgery. His face crumpled. Just slightly. We didn't think it would take that long. We thought it was routine. There it was again. We thought. We assumed. We decided. Not once did he say we asked. I pressed my palms against the table. You made decisions about my life without me. You changed my accounts. You restructured the house. You told my doctors I was confused. And when I woke up from a major surgery, no one was there. He opened his mouth, closed it. I watched him sit in the silence I had lived in for years. Watched him squirm under the weight of what he used to place on my shoulders. I didn't disappear to punish you, I said, quietly. I left to protect myself. He blinked. I don't understand, no. You don't? And that's part of it. He looked down. She said, you weren't doing well. She said we needed to step in before it got worse. I nodded slowly, and you listened. 'Cause it was easier than asking me. A long pause stretched between us. I'm sorry. He said it so quietly, barely heard it. I don't hate you, I said, but I don't owe you anything. He flinched. What do you want me to do? Nothing. But how do we fix this? We don't. His breath caught. You're my mother, and I always will be. But that doesn't mean I have to let you back into a life you used to. Treat like a task. He looked away, out the window toward the hibiscus shrubs by the parking lot. Can I see you again? No promises, I said. Not today, he stood slowly. It's the way someone stands from a chair they no longer deserve. I'm glad you're okay, he said. I am, I said. He lingered at the door, waiting, maybe hoping I'd say more. I didn't. He left. I sat for a long time after that, the bread still tucked under my arm, set it on the counter, made tea. Wrote in my notebook, March 10th. He came, he left. I stayed. I moved into the apartment at the end of March, second floor, even though I told myself I'd pick something ground level. But there was something about the window. It faced the eastern sky, and I liked the idea of waking to light. Marlene, help me unpack. She brought her label maker, even though I didn't ask. Everything she touched, she made easier. No questions, no prying. Just her presence, soft and undemanding, the way kindness should be. The rooms were smaller than what I'd left, but they fit me. My teacups stacked neatly. The bookshelf fit snug against the wall. My mother's scarf now hung beside the door, a kind of flag. Not for anyone else, just for me. I slept through the first night without waking. I didn't check my phone in the mornings anymore. I stopped waiting for updates I didn't need, apologies I didn't expect, or explanations that would only open wounds. Whatever version of the story they told themselves, they could keep it. I had nothing left to correct. Sometimes silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's space to breathe. In April, I bought a basil plant. It sits on my windowsill now, reaching toward the sun. I water it every morning and say hello out loud, like it might need the sound of a voice. I think I do too sometimes. I still write in the notebook. Less now. Not because the words have stopped, only because I don't have to prove anything. Anymore. Not even to myself. April 5. I belong to no one. And that is not a sadness. I volunteer at the center twice a week. I help teach a class on memoir writing. They don't know my story. I tell pieces, a metaphor here, a moment there. We write about turning points, about rooms we've left behind, about names we stopped answering to. One woman wrote a page titled, "The Day I Didn't Say Sorry." We all clapped. I saw my son once more, from a distance. He'd come to drop off something at the motel, not knowing I'd already moved. Rosa texted me, said he looked confused, almost lost. She didn't tell him where I'd gone. I hadn't asked her to protect me, but she did anyway. He left a box with a note taped to the top. For Mom, things you might want. I didn't pick it up. Rosa held on to it for a few weeks before asking if she should toss it. I told her yes. I didn't even ask what was inside. Letting go means not needing to know what they still think of you. I don't feel triumphant. I don't feel bitter. I feel like I walked out of a story where I was a supporting character in my own life. Now I live in a place where no one expects me to fold myself smaller. I answer only to myself, and the air is lighter for it. Sometimes I think about the hospital, bed, the beeping, the dry mouth, the blanket tucked around my feet. I don't think of it with pain anymore. I think of it as the moment I was born back into myself. Alone, but breathing, still here. I keep the original deed in my new filing drawer. Not as revenge, not as proof, just as memory. A reminder that I was not mistaken. That what they took from me was real. That what I reclaimed was earned. One afternoon, I took a walk by the bay. There was a boy flying a kite. It dipped and soared in the wind, red tail streaking across the sky like it had something to say. I sat on a bench and watched until my neck ached from looking up. Next to me was an old woman holding a closed umbrella. She didn't speak. But when the boy's kite faltered and dropped suddenly, she let out the smallest sound of surprise. We looked at each other and smiled. It felt like being seen without being known. That night, I sat at my table and pulled out one last thing from the bottom of the drawer. A photograph, faded at the edges. My son at 3, sitting in my lap, face smeared with chocolate. I had held on to it all this time. Not because of him, but because of me. The woman in the photo had been so sure, so full of love, so certain that love meant she could give everything and still be whole. She hadn't yet learned that love doesn't guarantee return. I whispered something to her as I lit a match. N held the corner of the photo to it. You gave what you could, and now you are free. The flames curled it slowly, not angrily. Just final. I dropped the last ash into the sink and watched the water carry it away. Then I made tea, opened the window, let the night in, and wrote my last sentence in the notebook. This time I decide who gets to call me anything else.